Hey moms, welcome back to Momestly Me, and in today's video we're going to be continuing our discussion on breastfeeding with my breastfeeding experience. Yeah, so some of this is going to be a repeat from things I've said in other videos. But essentially, when we found out we were pregnant and the discussion for feeding came up, I'd always been open to the idea of trying. I sort of just kind of went into it with this mindset that, well, I'm probably not going to be successful. And rather than getting my hopes up that I'm going to be really successful, it's better to remain kind of grounded. That way it's not as upsetting. I, more often than not, people, women, moms, have issues with breastfeeding for all kinds of different reasons. Their baby doesn't latch, they don't produce milk, or they don't produce enough, or there's a lot of different reasons. But I think if you're one of those women and you think that everyone just has this great, amazing journey with breastfeeding and you're the only one, just know that you're not. In fact, it's more common than I think a lot of people realize in the moment. But so I just didn't know a lot of people that had been successful. I knew some women that had tried and, and I saw what an emotional toll it was on some of them. And I'd heard stories and I knew, but for the most part, a lot of people around me had not been successful. And at that time, Dawn was the only exception. She's the only person I knew that had been successful, really successful. And so, after Oliver was born, they didn't focus, or they didn't want me to focus on getting him to latch until the second day that we were in the hospital, the day after he was born. And I tried to get him to latch. I didn't feel like we were being very successful. And then I thought, well, maybe he's not latching because my milk hasn't come in, because it is common for milk to take several days after the baby is born. Some people already have it. But I was worried that like he wasn't able to get anything or whatever. So anyway, one of the nurses helped me express with a hand to show me that like, no, there's stuff there. Like you just have to be patient and continue to work at it. We tried a couple of different positions with the lactation specialist at the hospital, and I wasn't feeling super confident. So our last day in the hospital, we were there longer than we should have been because it was a holiday and they had a hard time getting us discharged. And it was the last day in the hospital was the most successful breastfeeding day that I'd had, since he was born. So it was only a couple of days. But he was latching. He stayed latched and fed for a good half hour on both sides. Like he was doing really well. And it was kind of like, okay, maybe we can do this. So then we got home and I continued to try, but I'm going to be honest, I don't remember 100% what made me start supplementing, because I feel like we did formula even before we went. No, okay, so the first day out of the hospital, we had to take Oliver we had to take him to an appointment at the pediatrician's office. The pediatrician was a little slightly concerned about the weight, not because he had lost, but because he wasn't gaining, and suggested that we start supplementing and increase what we're feeding, or how often and that kind of thing. So, okay, fine. So I tried to do breastfeeding. I got really frustrated a lot because he wouldn't latch, or he would act, like he wasn't interested. And it was just, I was already exhausted. I was a new mom. There were so many things going on, and we were already supplementing with formula, at that time. And then right after, within a couple of weeks of him being born, we learned that he had a really, really bad reflux issue. So I felt like he was throwing up everything he was eating. I'm still trying to breastfeed. I'm trying to do the formula to make sure he's gaining weight. And I kind of went back and forth for a couple of weeks, his first couple weeks. And then I'm assuming that I expressed my concern to Dawn about the fact that like I was really close to giving up. And she was like, okay, let me just come over and we'll do a couple things together, because she had been pretty successful. She'd done a lot of research, that kind of stuff. And so she sat with me and showed me all kinds of different positions. I tried to use the boppy. It just didn't work for us. We did, football. We did all kinds of things just to try to get him to latch. But she was able to help me get a lot more comfortable with getting Oliver to feed. And it was hard to be patient, because the days that he wouldn't latch and eat were so frustrating, because it's like, you hear all these arguments about breastfeeding, and it's natural, it's what you're supposed to do, and blah blah blah. And so when you're trying to do it yourself and you're the only one in the room, and your child isn't latching or isn't interested or is getting frustrated because they're hungry, it's really hard when you are told all the time that it's what's supposed to happen, and then it doesn't, because you don't understand. You're like, okay, well, if it's supposed to be so natural, then why is it so difficult? And why isn't he latching? And why isn't this working? And yeah, so it was really frustrating. And I had moments like that off and on. But overall, I was able to finally kind of get a knack for it. And we were doing really well. We still had to supplement with formula, because I think I kind of had an issue producing enough even when I was at home with him, because he wasn't gaining enough weight to make the doctors happy. So he was like, you need to feed him more. You need to be feeding him more often, that kind of stuff. So, and then, you fast forward to when I went back to work, and within the first week, my milk plummeted. Like, I was pumping. I had already done some pumps at home before to try to get used to it. Or like if he wouldn't latch, I would still pump, like just to get the feeding out so that my body was still trying to produce. And it was exhausting having to stop every couple of hours or so to go pump. I mean, I sat in this room by myself, for sometimes 45 minutes to an hour just to try to pump like 3 ounces of milk, and Oliver's eating 6. Like, I wasn't even able to keep up with his demand the very first week that I returned to work. And some of it I'm sure is stress. And then of course, added to not making enough, that stressed me out and worried me. And I started to kind of slip into this like really like, ugh, why am I putting myself through all of this? Well, at the time, I had kind of 3 voices that I was listening to, Dawn, Melinda, and then there was a third person, and Dawn and Melinda, at this point, Melinda had been really successful with breastfeeding. She was a newer mom than I was at the time. And Dawn already had like a bigger kid and was at that point pregnant with her second. And, so I'm getting all this information, and then we've had Queen on the channel before. And Queen was like my work godsend. Like, she was someone, she's not the third person. I'm going to circle back to that in a minute. But Queen was like this little, just like work angel for me. Like, she brought me cookies to try. She sent me recipes. She texted me all the time, told me we were going to do this. Like, we were like a team. Like, she did a really good job of keeping my spirits up at work when I really just wanted to cry because my milk wasn't enough. It wasn't coming out enough. And I did do everything. I took 1 billion pills of fenugreek. I tried that nasty ass tea. I did the cookies. I drank the body armors. I stayed like ridiculously hydrated. I paid attention to what I was eating. I did all of these things. I did massaging. I did hot and cold. I mean, I did everything that all these things said to do, and it just wasn't there. And so when I started getting to kind of a pretty low point, my third person that had kind of been in my ear, which is no longer a friend, was not because of that, but was kind of like, you should just give up. Just give up. It's not worth it. Just give up. Like, that was what was in my ear constantly. And thankfully I had positive people in my ear as well. But I think if that had been the only person that I was talking to about it, and that had been the answer, I would have given up way before I did. And that's really sad, because one of the things that we believe in is building each other up and supporting each other, no matter whether it's fun stuff or hard stuff. And I think that I think this is just one of those things where, she had not been successful and had to give up really early because her child was losing a crazy amount of weight. And I think because her experience was so negative, she just really didn't want anybody else to have a positive experience. And I hate to say that, but that's how I feel. And that's definitely how it came across. So I I had Oliver in May of 2018. I went back to work in July. And I had a small procedure done in September. Well, one of the things that because I had a surgery and I was put to sleep for it, you have to pump and dump for 24 hours. And it was one of the hardest moments in my breastfeeding journey because it was the most milk my body produced like the entire time since my son had been born. And I literally watched these bottles fill up in ways they had never filled up for me before. And then I had to pour them down the sink. And I must have cried for hours after it happened. I was devastated to the point that, when I pumped after that, Rick had to throw it away because I just couldn't stomach it. It was so upsetting. And I started getting in a weird place about it because after the surgery, there was no more breast milk. I took, I think 3 or 4 days off from work just to be safe. And then there was the weekend and then I went back, and that first Monday back after my surgery, I pumped for 45 minutes and nothing came out on either side. And it was just okay, I'm done. And yeah, there are these miracle stories where people are oh, I ran out, or I didn't have any more milk, or I didn't have milk for so long, and then all of a sudden I did. And I had gone through so many emotions by this point that I just was I can't keep doing this to myself. If I had continued to try, it was just going to continue to make me feel worse and worse because, again, you're told that breast milk is what's best for your baby, and it's formula it's not as good, and breastfeeding babies do this better, and it's natural, and this is what you're supposed to do, and blah blah blah. It's this beautiful experience, and it wasn't any of that to me. I definitely got something out of the contact from just being skin to skin, or holding my son and being close to him. But I feel like those are things that I could have got even if I decided not to breastfeed. I still could have done skin to skin. I still could have kept him close like that. And I think that that's something people forget about. A lot of people get upset because they don't want to lose that closeness or that intimacy of those moments that they have with their child. And the reality is you can still have moments like that, just in a different way. I am a firm believer that fed is best, and I've pretty much always felt that way. I've never been someone that felt like you shouldn't breastfeed, and I've never been someone that felt like you should never do formula. I have a formula baby, Oliver. I successfully breastfed with supplement from formula for the first 4 months of his life. And then that was it. And then it was just formula until we introduced, foods at 6 months, and we kept formula until he was 1, and then we got rid of it altogether. But I just, I don't know. It was it was emotional in a couple of things. I definitely had some bad days, and I don't remember, what that was like. In terms of, I don't remember exactly what set those days off, but I know that the days when I didn't pump very much and we were running out of milk or we didn't have any, it was really difficult because it was definitely something I wanted to do. But I kind of just struggled with why isn't my body doing what it's supposed to be doing? Why isn't it taking care of our baby? It was really difficult, I think. And I think the other part of me, when I stopped breastfeeding, I was relieved. First of all, do you know how much easier it is to do formula? You can paint the picture any kind of way you want to, but at the end of the day, formula is way easier. It's more expensive, but it's easier. Not only that, but other people can feed your baby when you do formula, unless, of course, you do breast milk that you freeze and stuff, but that was an option for me because I didn't make enough. And it was also hard because I went from being only knowing people who weren't successful to being surrounded by the two women that were the most active in my life being like crazy successful and talking about it like together or separate. And it's just like, there were moments where I was like, yeah, okay. And then there were moments where I was like, can you please shut the fuck up about how successful and easy your breastfeeding experience is? Like, some of us don't get that luxury and it's really difficult. And I've talked about this before. I'm pretty sure it was in our wrap up from our Humanizing Moms, but it's perfectly okay for me to feel that way. It's okay for me to be envious. It's okay for me to feel bad or to be disappointed that I wasn't able to do something that I really wanted to do for my son. And anytime anybody tells you that it's not okay to be upset when other people are successful, seriously, seriously needs a reality check, because we're human and humans feel things that they don't always have control over. Now, what's not okay is being shitty to someone who is doing really well or doing okay and saying things like, give up, give up, give up. Those are the types of things that you shouldn't do. But it's okay to have a dialogue with the people that you care about that, like, yeah, it makes me feel like garbage when you talk about how easy and great your breastfeeding experience was, when you know that I just failed and I struggled and it wasn't a positive experience for me. Because at the same time that I can be happy and supportive of them, they need to be understanding and respectful of me. And I think it goes both ways. Potentially an unpopular opinion, but I don't really care. Humans are humans. But I think that I don't know that I ever got to a place where I accepted it, because it obviously still upsets me. Like, I started tearing up just now talking about it. I think that it's gonna probably always linger. Like, in the back of my mind, I'm always gonna be like, oh, I wish I had been able to breastfeed longer, and I wish I'd been able to do what I wanted to do to make it last as long as I wanted it to last, and it just didn't. And it's okay. I think I've said this before too, but Dawn and Melinda are both crazy successful breastfeeding people, and their kids get sick more than mine does. So if someone is not being successful or straight up just doesn't want to breastfeed, don't make them feel bad, and don't shame them and make them feel like, well, your kid's going to be sick all the time or you're going to have all these problems. It's not true. And in fact, there was a study not that long ago that I was reading about, and I don't even know if I could probably find it and link it. I'll see what I can come up with. But there was even a study that said that long-term breastfeeding is no different than formula. And the things that you have to consider when you're pro breastfeeding and you hear that is that formula is not what it was, 10 years ago. It's not even what it was 5 years ago. They've added stuff to it. They've changed the way they make it. Like, it's not what it was. And I think that that's worth talking about, because there are so many people who are like, oh, you use formula, or, oh, you didn't want to breastfeed. Like, prerogative. Like, it's up to us to decide what we want to do. And breastfeeding is just something that, while I support it, I don't damn people who don't do it. And honestly, having been through my own journey and having my own struggles and how awful it made me feel all the time, I kind of understand. I get not wanting to go through all of that. Now, if Rick and I decide that we want to have another baby, I will try to breastfeed again. But I hope that I'm able to go into it with a little bit more confidence, because I think that my confidence is what hurt me in the beginning. Like, I feel like because I was going into it thinking I'm probably not going to be successful, I was kind of more likely to be like, okay, well, I guess I need to give up, So I think you have to do what's right for your baby. I think if formula is what works for you, then do formula. If you have to do formula to supplement and you still breastfeed, do it. If you want to just do breastfeeding and you're able to be successful and you don't need anything else, that's awesome too. But I think that my journey was just not a very positive one. And so my opinions are more along just doing whatever feels right for you and what's right for your baby. And don't let other people tell you that because you're not doing it, that you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, because it's ridiculous. And yeah, that's my TED Talk on my breastfeeding experience. I'm super honest. I say what I feel. And I think that breastfeeding is one of those topics that just gets heated so quick over nothing. At the end of the day, I don't care if your kid's eating Cheetos out of the back seat of your car. As long as they're getting some calories and they're growing and doing good, that's all that matters. I think we forget that sometimes. We get so wrapped up in our opinions, we forget that at the end of the day, the only people who knows what's best for that child is their parents. And the only people that they could look to outside of that that matters is doctors. But anyway, yeah, so that's all I have for that. So yeah, if you like this video, make sure to hit like. If you had a journey similar to mine, or if you've been a victim of mom shaming because you didn't want to breastfeed, let us know. I'm always happy to interact with people who had struggles or who are struggling or who got flack because they didn't want to. Something I feel very strongly about. Like this video, leave a comment. Make sure you subscribe to our channel so you can see more awesome content like this. And you can always check us out on the socials, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at Momestly Me. Oh, and make sure you hit the bell so that you get notified when these awesome videos come out. And yeah, good night.